something that I see because of my own lived experience. If I go, oh my God, I'd be by the side of the road now just sleeping, So just that is kind of the bias that you have as an able person. So it's very tricky sometimes to be in that headspace or what exactly is the life of someone who is ill.
Welcome to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, a formerly repressed creative soul turned fiction writer, story editor, and author accelerator certified fiction book coach. At Write It Scared, we tell the truth about why writing a novel is so hard by acknowledging that most writers grapple with two stories: the one they want to put on the page to the best of their ability, and the often subconscious internal story that prevents them from doing it. This show is designed to help you identify and rewrite the internal narrative holding you back while you discover and write the story you want to tell and learn all the tools to help you do that successfully. Join me each week for a new episode where we'll talk about writing to deepen our understanding of the craft and of ourselves as writers. Writing a novel is an inside job that we do not do alone. Welcome to Write It Scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, writer. Welcome back to another episode of the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey, and I'm so happy to have you here. Today, I'm in conversation with my friend Sandra Postma, who is also an author accelerator certified fiction book coach. And we are going to talk about how to write when you are a writer who struggles with a chronic illness, as well as how to write characters who struggle with a disability or have a different lived experience than you do, and how to do that with integrity. I hope you enjoy this episode. It's actually quite vulnerable, and I want to say once again, thank you to Sandra for her courage and her authenticity, and for just always showing up and being the beautiful human that she is. But before we jump in, I wanted to remind you that another cohort of my small group book coaching for fiction writers will begin in January of 2025. This program is for any commercial fiction writer who wants to start developing their story idea and write their novel in the coming year. So join a small but mighty, welcoming group of writers who are working through the same story struggles as you, get professional editorial guidance with one-on-one support with individual book coaching calls for every writer from me each month. The space is limited to 6 writers, but you can secure a spot on the enrollment list right now. If you are interested, just go to writeitscared.co/group coaching to learn more and apply. All right, now let me introduce you to Sandra, and then we will jump into her interview. Sandra Postma is a former journalist who switched from fact to fiction after discovering her own writing held the power for change. Founding Your Story Mentor in 2021, Sandra is now a writer of fiction and nonfiction and a certified book coach. In her work as a book coach, Sandra helps writers with a chronic illness, disability, or mental struggles. She helps writers embrace their unique voice and develop their story ideas into novels. As a woman with multiple chronic illnesses herself, amongst them ME/CSF, Graves' disease, chronic migraines, and anxiety disorder, and being a HSP or highly sensitive person and bi, she knows what it's like to feel invisible to society and misunderstood by many. Making her writers feel seen and making them realize how important their individual voices and stories are has become the main goal in her work. She helps people find their voice, write, and thrive. Oh, hello, Sandra. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Hi, Stacey. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm just so lovely to be here.
So I gave you a bit of a bio, but would you please share more about your journey to becoming a writer and a book coach with our listeners?
Yeah, it's been a while for me. I've basically been writing since I could hold a pen, and I'm not even exaggerating. It was literally me at my desk at like 7 years old. I was even just copying the phone book. That's what I did in my free time. That was me, happy me. As long as I just had a pen in my hand, I was fine. I was happy. And I got an actual typewriter later, which I used to write stories and write song lyrics on. I did all kinds of writing that you can imagine. But then my teens hit and school hit and all the mandatory reading hit that wasn't really what I would read myself. And it just kind of sapped me from my entire creativity. It was just sapped away from that. And then I also got chronic illness. And so my creative soul was just drained. And it took me about 10 years after that to finally get my way back to writing. I graduated with journalism and English from uni. And after a period of really bad illness after that, I just kind of came back up and I was like, I want to write again. I need to write again. But I haven't stopped since. And at first, writing really was an escape from my own shitty life. And then over time, as I got slightly better, it was still an escape, but it was also healing that I had something to say. And then one day, as I really just wanted even more out of life, because I couldn't work 9 to 5, Monday, Friday, because of my illnesses, I ran into Jenny Nash's Author Accelerator program. And it was just like one of those moments in life that you look back on and kind of go, how did that happen? Because it kind of brought all my skills and loves and passions together. And so, yeah, here I am, 3 years later, still writing and also book coaching.
Thank you for sharing that. And so tell us more about what you do as a book coach. Where's your focus and who do you help and why do you help them?
Yeah, having the experiences that I've had with writing as someone who deals with limitations every single day, it's both very low battery, also pain every day, brain fog every day, and other kind of sort of symptoms that go with all those chronic illnesses. I know the challenge that it is to write at all. I can't just sit at a desk and write because that's just not how chronic illness works. And having that experience, I've just been able to counter so many other writers who are secretly dealing with that as well. They often don't talk about it because they're, writing is, you need to sit at your desk every day. You need to write a certain amount of time every day to be a writer. And they can't do that. And it just affects your whole sense of self and your whole identity as a writer. And I just, having gone through that same journey myself, I really saw the struggle in so many writers around me that dealt with the same things. And the more I spoke about my own struggles and experiences with it and how I dealt with all of that, the more writers came to me saying, can you help me? Because this is something I deal with too. And so throughout the months, really, since becoming certified, I just started to helping those types of writers because, it's my own lived experience. And it's just really, really nice to be able to help people and see them find their voice and kind of go, but those writing rules actually don't make any sense. I write when I can, and that makes me a writer. And just to be able to see them finally embrace their writer identity and the fact that they can actually write really good books.
That's awesome. Do you find from your own experience and from the writers that you've worked with that there's a level of shame or guilt around not being able to write like we think the dominant paradigm typically writes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that from my own experience, I was very ashamed. When I read Stephen King's On Writing book, it's an incredible book, but some passages were so hurtful. And I didn't really realize it when I was reading it. It was just reading this really good book. And then there were certain passages I was like, this is not me, And so I remember putting it away, just finishing it and kind of going, oh, so it's probably not for me. Because I can't write every day, because I can't sit at that desk every day. I can't do it for a sec. I can't get up at 5 a.m. and write. Can't stay up till 3 p.m. and write 3 a.m. And that has been, that was incredibly hurtful, and it makes you ashamed in the sense that there's just something that you really want to do, and then this huge author, he doesn't literally say that I can't write, obviously. But that's how I, in my own self-doubting mindset, interpreted it. And that took a long time to get out of. And to kind of even just recognizing it, that is what is happening. And to kind of go and stop and think, but it's actually kind of strange that is a rule that I have to write every day. Because I think about writing all the time, every day. think about my characters all the time. And that does not make me any less of a writer. And so this has not been an overnight thing. It really has taken me years to go from the shame of not being an actual, writer, author, to kind of seeing myself as, oh God, I am a writer because it's just who I am. And it takes time and it takes a lot of work, but it's so worth it.
And that's why I absolutely love to hear you speak and talk about this, because have you read the Brene Brown? I think it's Brene Brown, the quote that it's like, empathy and compassion are the antidotes to shame, and shame keeps us in the dark, and shame keeps us small, and shame keeps us from pursuing the things that we love, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
when people are willing to step up and be vulnerable and say, hey, I struggle with this too, this is my experience, we don't feel so alone, right? When we find our people, we don't feel so alone, and then we can rise together, which I think is really cool. And I appreciate that you're out in the world and willing to share on that level, because it relates.
Yeah, and I think
it connects.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about that. It's all about connection. Because when you're chronically ill, your life is very small. Also, your home is often just as far as you go. And so being able to kind of go online and share experiences with people and getting messages from people go, I don't actually share this with anyone, but thank you. Because this is exactly my life as well and what I deal with. And sometimes it's really hard to be dishonest, but then when you get messages like that, it's like, because, being vulnerable means being open to criticism and judgment and feedback. But when people come to you and they actually say, you make me feel less alone because I thought I was alone in this because I live a very lonely life, and you just made me see that I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
And that's why I went into this book coaching career thinking I was just going to help people write books. But it's just turned out, and I know that you know this too, it turns out to be so much more than that. It's just about the people and about the connections that you make and about seeing people and about helping them value their own voices and overcoming self-doubt. And it's not just about writing a book. It's just about how you hold yourself in the world. And that has
in front of the mirror.
Oh gosh, yes. Yes, so hard.
Yeah.
But also, what do you do? What do I do? I do lots of things. Because, from the onset, I'm like, I help people write books. And then they're like, hey, okay. And I'm like, yeah, but actually, it's quite transformative, what I do. It's just so meaningful to be able to make those connections. And again, because we live this really small life, because our illness keeps us at home and often without a big social life. It's so, what's the word? Valuable, but also vital to make those connections online and to have people come to you and go, thank you for, you see me. It's the best. Honestly, this sounds really cheesy, but it's true.
No, I
And it also makes you
get it. I totally get it.
Let's be honest, you're also vulnerable because you feel alone and you want people to kind of go, bring that to me too. So that in time, I also don't feel so alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's
kind of a reverse altruism to be
yes,
completely, right? If that's a thing or a term, but I totally understand what you mean. And, this is how we fight the dark. We let the light in with exposure, whatever that dark may be for the individual, for the writer, and allowing ourselves to be seen takes risk.
Yeah.
Putting our words on the page, allowing other people to read them. There is a certain amount of risk involved with that. So with that, what would you say in your experience working with writers are some common unhelpful internal narratives that keep them from doing the work they want to do?
It's kind of like an ongoing story in the sense that with chronic illness often comes fatigue. And with fatigue comes bravery. And when you combine those two and you want to write, there's an immediate block of, I can't write now because I'm too tired, because my brain can't actually form a sentence right now. And these symptoms are continuous. And so you kind of go in the moment when you go, I can't right now, but I probably won't be able tomorrow either. Probably next week I'm still going to be tired too. And the week after that. And so you don't start because you're like, why would I even bother? I might want to, but I won't be able to finish this story anyway. I might be able to finish it in 20 years. That's not what I want. So I might just not start. I'll just think about it and that's it. And that inner narrative of, I might as well not bother because who wants to hear my voice anyway? Who's interested in my story? It'll take too long anyway. I won't be able to do a book tour anyway. I'm going to get rejected anyway. These are obviously all narratives that many of us feel. But for us, that time span of writing itself is such a block. And what I always say, and that is something that I find for myself to have been most successful in getting me writing, literally just do it 1 minute a day. Even if it's just coming up with a name for a character, even if it's just in your mind walking through your world, it doesn't have to be that you write full chapter every day. That isn't what writing is. I mean, we know the phrase, when we stare out the window, the writer is writing. Because it's too much of writing is thinking. Not always the act of writing is writing. And just thinking about your story, about your themes, about your characters, what they want. All of that adds to what a writer is. And so that when you do get to that moment where you're like, you know what, I should have a good day. I'm going to write a paragraph. That you know exactly what you want to write, what you need to write, what you want to do. Because the story has become part of you. And I think this is something that I had to work out myself, again, for years. That realization that writing is not just the act of writing. It's thinking about your story. It's doing the research. It's all that. And you don't have battery every day. When you're ill to do all these things, I definitely have weeks where I can't do anything. That's just the reality of having a chronic illness. But there will always come a time when you do feel better. And that's the moment where you latch onto that writing desire and do it. Because this is so key. You cannot chastise yourself for something that is not your fault. Becoming ill is not your fault. And so you can't blame yourself for something you had no say in. Again, this is not something that happens overnight. You're not like waking up tomorrow and going, yes, now I believe that I can actually, do it and I'm going to write this book. But as long as you make that commitment to the writing life and to your writer identity, you will get there.
It sounds like there's a lot of acceptance.
Yeah.
Letting go of expectation, letting go of comparison, none of which we do overnight. It sounds a lot like recovery, which I happen to be in, where it's one day at a time. It's one moment at a time. It's,
That is exactly it. And the trouble with being chronically ill, and it is kind of, I can relate to you in that sense, is that it is every day and even sometimes every minute kind of going, how do I feel right now? Every hour kind of going, okay, I feel really bad right now. My mind is going in really bad directions because I feel so bad and I can't do anything. It's a continuous struggle with acceptance. And I always say I don't like the word accepting. I only like the word acknowledging. I don't accept that something
doesn't mean
is.
approval.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is why I use acknowledgement. Like I
Acceptance.
acknowledge. Exactly. It's like I acknowledge that this is my reality right now, but I do not accept the fact that it is. Like I don't approve of this. They say managing chronic illness is more than a full-time job, and it's true. And I'm sure it's the same for recovery.
So do you have any tips of wisdom to impart to a listener out there who may have a chronic illness and be struggling to write?
Well, there's two. The one is that your voice does matter. The problem with chronic illness is that our society is based on, this Western society is based on capitalism and values, income and money and what you contribute to society economically. When you're chronically ill, that is often a big, huge fucking problem because you can't work. And so your voice is taken from you, is diminished. You are seen as a burden to society because you require healthcare, etc., etc. So that inner voice, just as a human being, is already diminished, let alone when you actually want to tell your story. Because that is not a fact. It's not the reality of who you are. You have such deep value. Every single writer has deep value. Every single human being does. And you really have to do the work to see that yourself. Because if you don't, you'll never value the story that you're writing. And attached to that is, I don't think people with illness realize how unique their voice actually is. Because when you deal with illness, because we feel that because we live at home, that we actually have no life experience. And is that write what you know? I hear that so often. But Sam, you have to write what you know, and I know nothing. And I always kind of go, and again, Stephen King, I say, do you think that Stephen King knows about clowns in sewers? I don't think he has personal experience with that. But what he has experienced it with is fear, human fear. And he knows exactly how to use human fear in his stories. And the same goes for us. And what we know is life and death, illness and health, being scared out of our minds for our own health, for our own lives, grieving our own futures, the life that we could never lead because we got ill. We have so much experience with such deep emotion. And that's what writing is. It's about emotion. It's about feeling. It's about change and learning. And that is something that people with illness know so much about. And always when I say this to people, you can just kind of see their eyes kind of going, oh, I never thought of it that way. Because again, that write what you know, we think about it in terms of external stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't go on roller coasters, so I don't know what it's like to go on a roller coaster, so I can't write about it. That's not what that is about. It's so much about what you know, the experiences that you had in your life. How did they make you feel? And that is what writing is. It's about emotion and about feeling and, again, connection. And that's something that we know deeply.
How important is finding a community to belong to a writer's journey who's struggling with chronic illness?
If I speak from experience, it has been a lifesaver. I remember I was so alone when illness makes you so lonely. I mean, think of it when you have the flu. You feel really, really shit. And if you pity yourself, you're like, oh, what a minute.
100%. I'm a terrible, terrible flu person.
We all get mad flu. We always think that mad flu is a male thing. We all do it. We all feel, social to ourselves. But imagine having the flu all your life. And, having that, you're the only one who has that experience. And you can't share your pain with someone else. You just can't. The pain is in your body and you can't share it. And it's so lonely because it's painful on an emotional and on a physical level. And especially when you're surrounded by, to put it, as we do, abled people who are not ill, and you see them go off to concerts, you see them go off to something they love. It's painful every single day. And when that is all you know, and it was all I knew, it gets really, really lonely. And I remember the moment where I found a community online, and I didn't even interact with them. I was just kind of lurking, But I saw what they wrote, and it changed everything. I went from someone who felt like the weakest person in the world, like the worst person in the world, because illness happened to me. I felt like the biggest burden to everyone around me. I felt like the worst friend ever. Continue the list. I felt it. And here I was looking at people who were like, I'm not a burden. My illness is my burden. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Which
gives you there's a sense of empowerment and ownership there. You can't do anything about a problem that you don't have any ownership in some way, shape, or form. I relate that to drinking problems, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from my lens, I'm terrible and worthless. I can't do this. I'm a drain. My friends and family and everyone around me. And the truth is, no, I'm a person with a problem.
Yeah.
and I can, I need to find the box of tools. I totally get where you're coming from. So do you have any resources you could recommend?
I just created a workshop called How to Create an Authentic Disabled Character. And it's for both people with illness and those who are not ill but want to write about a disabled character and want to do it with integrity and want to tell the truth about what it's like. And also just, what it's like to write about something that is outside your own lived experience. And that will soon go on my website. So keep an eye on that. And yeah, talking about community, I'm actually creating one. I'm in the final stages of creating a virtual online community for people with chronic illness. It's exactly the community that I encountered that helped me. I really hope to be able to help others feel less alone. And not just, it's the empowerment also, because our inner narrative when you're ill is devastating and dangerous at times. And if I could offer just a few people a place where they can go and kind of go, I'm having a really bad day. I need help right now. And just be there. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I just have lived experience. And I have tools now to cope with certain things. I'm not healed. I'm not cured. I'm still very, very ill. But I have so many more tools in my belt that I can use to help others as well. So that's coming as well. And I also offer one-on-one book coaching to anyone who wants to write a book but feels limited by their daily limitations.
So to recap, we've talked about what are some of the unhelpful internal narratives that writers who are struggling with chronic illness may hold. And one is the belief that their voice doesn't matter. And two is the belief that they are utterly alone. And a couple of the suggestions that you have offered is to embrace that piece of the lived experience, if I'm hearing you correctly. And that it allows you to go into a deeper emotional level with your characters in your writing, because you're writing from that piece of your lived experience. And then the other was to find ways to be a part of a community of people who can, share experiences similar to yours. And I always think that is the bright spot, I think, of most writers' lives, is finding people that resonate with us. Let's turn it over to the craft piece and talk about, because you mentioned your workshop that is going to come up, about writing characters who have disability or chronic illness, and how to do it when that is outside of your lived experience, and how to do it with integrity and leaving the stereotypical aside and the generalization aside. So talk to us about how a writer can approach writing a character that does struggle with disability or that struggles with a chronic illness and be mindful of their own bias. What would you suggest?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think it's actually very simple. Talk to people. It really is that simple. Talk to people. And obviously it depends on what your genre is, what kind of story you are writing, and take that with you. And always know that, for one person with that illness you talk to, someone else will have just a slightly different experience. So yes, talk to people, read, go to themighty.com, which is a great resource for all kinds of chronic illnesses with personal stories of people living with those illnesses. And
did you say that was themighty.com?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's a great resource that's what the community that I found with is basically a community of storytellers telling their story about illness. It's really quite powerful. I've been published on there quite a number of times as well. And just being mindful that, we are kind of a very vulnerable group in the sense that in storytelling, we've always either been used as a comedic, or as inspiration to the healthy people to live their best lives. And so keep away from that, please. And just talk to us. Just come talk to us. We'd love to be featured in your stories. But also, I've talked a lot about characters with disabilities, but at the same time, we're everywhere. It's just like when you talk about queer characters are everywhere, I think people often forget that illness is everywhere in our lives, and we're so absent from storytelling. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. When we go on a road trip, no one ever gets really tired. But we always have like full batteries to go on these trips. It's something that I see because of my own lived experience. If I go, oh my God, I'd be by the side of the road now just sleeping. So just that is kind of the bias that you have as an able person. So it's very tricky sometimes to be in that headspace or what exactly is the life of someone who is ill.
Mhm.
So yes, actually talk to people, and that's just the best you could do, really.
Have you ever heard of Writing the Other? It's a reference that I found by Nissa Shaw and Cynthia Ward, and it was written quite a few years ago. And I've been reading it, and it's definitely eye-opening about how to write a character that isn't like you. And I found it to be, so far, a really helpful resource. I'm sure a lot of the listeners will know it, but it's Writing the Other, A Practical Approach by Nissa Shaw and Cynthia Ward. And it's got a bunch of stories in the back of it that are written from different cultural perspectives, and it has a ton of exercises. One of the things it talks about is, there is a dominant paradigm. Wherever you live in the world, there will be kind of a dominant paradigm for your society. And it's like kind of trying to find your way to shift from that perspective and step into another character's lived experience. And part of it comes from identifying your own bias is that you don't even know that you have. Because
And it's interesting because even my own bias when it comes to, I've been really ill, but before that I was mildly ill. And so when I became severely ill, that also kind of changed my perspective and kind of went, oh, I was privileged, in the sense that I was not that ill and now I'm privileged again. So, that shifts all the time as well. And that's also very good to be mindful of as writers. Like it shifts all the time, and just be okay with that, that everyone will have just a slightly different lived experience. But as long as you're doing it with integrity, I applaud you.
yeah, privilege is such an interesting word to me, but it's really like it's the ability to practice a behavior without risk or adversity.
Yeah. And also, we've become so aware of it in certain situations that it almost becomes, it kind of shifts on itself in the sense that once you're aware of it, it kind of melts away because you start to act accordingly to realizing. But right now, I know that I'm sitting here talking to you, like I couldn't have done that years ago. And so I immediately shift I know that, if I could write about this conversation, I would immediately go, but I realized that a couple of years ago I wouldn't be able to do this. So if you're not in that place yet either, don't fret. In a couple of years, you might be able to sit behind a laptop and talk to people again as well. And, so it's good to be aware of it, but it can also be tiring.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other piece is like, I think everybody kind of discounts how big of an emotional load writing is. I mean, it's emotional, it's intellectual, it requires a lot of creative energy. Isn't a simple thing to generate or regenerate. And for some, that's more difficult than others. So I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for, how difficult this really is.
Yeah, and it also seems because we're just, you can do it sitting down, so it kind of, it's again that whole idea of, oh, well, you're sitting down, so it's not actually, tiring.
No, my brain just did like
my brain. Oh my gosh, it's going like, and this is also why something like brain fog is absolutely horrific when you're a writer because you need this thing, and it's just full of mist, and yeah.
And then you're asking it to do like 50 push-ups.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a great place to wrap up. I have just 2 more quick questions for you. Well, maybe 3. 1, do you have any authors that you particularly admire because of the way that they write about characters with disability or that they themselves have a disability and they write about it?
Well, it's really interesting to me that because of my own interest in this, I've been doing a lot of research and finding out a lot of legendary writers having chronic illnesses or mental health issues, and having no idea when I read them. I had no idea. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, I could have seen it, Ernest Hemingway, Virginia Woolf with severe depression. Flannery O'Connor actually had lupus, which I didn't know when I used to read her at uni, And there's one Dutch author who sadly passed away. She has my illness, ME/CFS. And she was so open about it during a time that I found out that I was ill. And I was gaslit by doctors, and doctors wouldn't acknowledge my illness because it wasn't acknowledged officially in the Netherlands at that time. And she was just a beacon of light to me because she was sharing about it. She was writing about it. Her name was Renate Dorrestein. And I always remembered her. She has my illness and she's a writer. She was like this beacon for me, even in dark days. It was like, she did it. I can do this. Yeah. And again, that kind of shows you why that is so important. And they don't even need to be writing about it to just be important,
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I feel the same when I read writers that struggle with similar, issues that I do, whether they're in recovery or, have a learning disability or those kind of things. Totally. Yeah. So what wish would you like to impart to your fellow writers? If you could breathe a wish out into the world, what would it be?
My wish is that everyone could see their own writing work, that everyone could feel how much their voice matters and how valued it is. Because can you imagine the stories that would be written if every writer kind of felt their own value? Oh my God.
Yes, I could imagine that. For other people, sometimes I struggle to imagine it for myself, but my wish is your wish, Sandra.
Oh, Betty.
Yeah. And where can listeners find you?
Yeah, they can find me on yourstorymentor.com. And so you can sign up to my weekly newsletter there where I write about personal stories, about life and writing when you have an illness. And I'm on Instagram a lot, Your Story Mentor. So that's where you can find me.
Can you tell me again what the workshop's name is that's coming up?
The workshop's called How to Create an Authentic Disabled Character.
Beautiful.
That's coming up soon. Yeah.
All right. And I will make sure that I pop a link into that because I definitely want to take it as well. Okay. So quick recap. I will make sure that I put in the mighty.com into the show notes. I'll also put a link into the book that I mentioned, Writing the Other.
Please do. Yeah.
And then all the links to find Sandra and her workshop. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. It is always a pleasure. The backstory here is Sandra and I have been friends for a while. And it's just, we don't get to talk enough. And I absolutely love you. Okay, I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Write It Scared podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And please leave a review. Reviews help other writers like you find the voices and messages they need to hear to continue to write their stories. Let's lift each other up. Remember, you can be scared and still be unstoppable. I'll see you next week.